Buenos dias, Gunners Collective. Back at it, you already know. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. It goes another one. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. She's a what? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. She's a hoe with a ding-dong habit. Bye-yap, bye-yap, bye-yap. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. You already know what it is, man. You see the thumbnail right there, and then menudo style in a direct fashion. I'm going to get straight into it. ATown Surenos, stand up, right? Because they're still standing up, homie. After all these years, decades later, a gang that was established on a whim is, to me, one of the original upstater Sureño gangs from my area, if not the original one, man. It's just facts, just what it is. This is a gang that was started in 1989. How do I know? Because I was around to tell the story, man. Guess what? I was right there in the casa, actually in the fucking spot where these vatos decided that if for no other reason, they were going to call themselves the ATown Surenos. Who would have thought that, huh? The wind blew that day. So I have a grandmother, man. She's passed. You know, she's since passed. A lot of my familia on my father's side has passed. But she was a real one, right? When I say a real one, you know, the type of grandmother that you get up in the morning and everything's cooked when you wake up. You know, like, Sasuke, hey, mijo, breakfast, lunch, and dinner's right there. Sasuke, a little bit of this, a little frijoles, a little bit of that, a little tortilla here, a little tortilla there. And everybody knew that was the spot, man. My grandmother got down, but she didn't take no shit neither, right? But she knew what it was. She knew that her familia, we were all ex-convicts. We were all on our way to prison, on our way to CYA, in and out of juvenile halls, in and out of jails and prisons. It's just what we did, man. That was my father's side of the family. It was like a given, Holmes. If you were born into that family, you were going to see the inside of some walls or behind some bars. That's just how it is. I mean, fuck Pensa. You know what I mean? I come from one of them ghetto families. But at the same time, you know, she lived in a little town called Winton, which was right in between Merced, Atwater. Winton's like to the left, it's to the right. It's doing its own thing. And at this time, you know, the movie Colors, Boys in the Hood. I don't even think Boys in the Hood had come out yet, but Colors had just come out, and everybody was Crippin' and Blood. Everybody thought they were Crips and Bloods. And I remember back in them days, man, I used to think that I was hard as rocks, right? I was a young kid, man. I used to wear the red poncho. Even back then, man, I knew what I was destined to be. There was no doubt about that, man. I never switched up, never was a Crip, a Blood. I was just a North Bay thug, and that's just how it was. But I wasn't pushing a hard line. I was a little ass kid, you know, being at my grandma's house, eating the tortillas like everyone else. But I had a primo. And my primo was just coming into his own, meaning that he was a teenager, Holmes. That's about the time you start really gangbanging. That's about the time that you really start to gain your respect and you're about that business. And he had two homeboys that had just moved into town recently, man. Or it was the first time that I had seen them. And they came to my abuelitas a couple times. And I would see these vatos because they were bigger than others. And they just had that gangster stilo and that gangster look to them. But here's the truth, man. And it's going to break some hearts. But Spencer, it's the way it is, Holmes. These guys were not claiming Sur or Sureños, albeit they were from down south, Southern California, Long Beach in particular, if I'm for sure. But they were actually claiming Crip, right? So I remember my primo and these two individuals, and these were the guys that eventually would start the ATown Sureño gang, which is now known, you know, as ATown Sur, but the upstaters. I remember being in this fucking casa one day and seeing my primo. My primo had a blue sweater on. And I kind of tripped out like, hey, look at that vato. Is he crippin'? All of a sudden. And he was. And they were claiming insane Crip, right? From Long Beach. And I guess these two individuals had come. And this is just what it was. Like I said, the Crip thing was trending heavy. And they were claiming insane Crip. And they were starting to tag it. And it was starting to be known in Atwater. And I remember a lot of the Norteños from Merced were tripping on this. Because we weren't used to seeing Crippin' and Bloodin'. We had gangs like the McNamara Lynch Mob out of Merced. Wasn't too many Bloods and Crips at that time, right? People were starting to go that route, go that way. But it wasn't necessarily. It was either Norteños and other gangs, or it was what it was, right? So anyways, I remember this day, man, these two dudes are coming in and they're doing their thing. And with my primo, and I remember I looked at him, and I looked at him with respect because they had a whole different stilo to them. You know, and their names ultimately were Max and Sal Flores. They were two brothers that had moved from Long Beach to Northern California. You know, so they brought that Southern California flavor. And although, you know, a lot of things are the same now, back then it was totally different, man. they were more gangsterish. They had that more thuggish style, that thuggish, ruggish bone. They came, to press. So anyways, I'm chilling. And I'm just peeping the scene, man. My awareness is up. Even as a kid, there was nothing for me to really speak on, but they were claiming insane crip. And then I remember out of the blue, one day, shit switched up. Shit changed, man. And I seen my primo, and he was wearing a big old blue sweater, and it had a big old X3 on it. And he was talking about, we're insane sureños, that's it. And I said, okay, all right, shit. Then he went and got Sureño Mexicano blasted on his chest. And they started to accumulate and recruit individuals from around the way. People that not necessarily were rejects, that weren't involved in Norteños, but they had their own little stilo, their own flavor, man. These vatos were so popular in the town of Atwater and Winton that they infused what they were pushing, their narrative, to everyone around them. And they started to gain numbers and gain traction. And there was a lot of things happening, man. And I remember the first time that my primo came into the pad and he was like, hey, we started a new gang, homie. We're called the ATown Surenos, right? And there was also another clique that started maybe a few months later called the ATown Dukes. If I remember, man, it's been a long time. I was a young kid. This is pre-YA, pre-everything, pre-murder case, 1989. And that was the year that the two founders, I'll say my primo was actually a founder as well because he was involved heavily, but I don't think he's the one that established the foundation. There was two brothers, Max and Sal Flores, who are actually legendary figures, man, when it comes to Merced County politics and what was going on there. They were the guys that brought the Sureño movement to the Atwater area. That's facts, man. And I remember they started to gain numbers, and a lot of my homeboys and a lot of the OGs that were from Merced started to notice this and started to trip. And then when I would go back to the hood, I'd leave my grandmother's house, because all the Sureños were there. I was surrounded. That's it. Facts, right? I was surrounded. But no one ever tripped off me because I was a young kid, and they took he ain't nothing, man. He's a mosquito in this motherfucker, right? I felt a different way, but they felt a certain way. They started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I started to notice that vatos from LA, vatos from Southern California were moving into the area. There was a street called Bobby Street. They were getting deep on. A lot of Sureño gangs started to establish, like Winton Barrio Parque, and all these upstate Sureños, pre-upstate. They weren't claiming upstate yet. They were just Sureño gangs. Started to come out, I don't know where the vatos came from, but they were there, right? And these two brothers were like fucking mafiosos, homes. These two brothers were like the godfathers, the John Gottis of the area. Everybody wanted to get at them. I remember everybody in Merced used to be talking about it. If you went to parties, anywhere you went, they were like, hey, we got to get these two vatos. These vatos are starting to take over, man. They're trying to, accumulate and recruit our soldados. They're starting to recruit all vatos that should be norteños into the Sureño movement. And I remember at that time I was a kid. I was like, let them do their thing, eh? They don't pose no threat. They're over there in Atwater, Winton. That's 10 miles away, homie. They're not going to come into Merced and do anything until they did, right? One day we're chilling, and one of the vatos named Max Flores, man, he had an Impala, a very distinct Impala. It was like a teal greenish blue. He always had a Mexican flag hanging from it. Even back then, like I said, they went from crippin' to Sureñoing, and they got with the business, man. They started to get really into their Mexican heritage, Mexican pride. It's just what it was. I was always into Chicanos, but they were straight into Sureño Mexicanos, and that's just how that was and how that went. So anyways, these vatos fucking, they cruise in one time to a barrio, right? And they're just posted up at a park chilling. And there's a gang of Southsiders there. And I remember the homeboys are like, hey, we're going to go hit these vatos up. This is back in the days. Motherfuckers in the town weren't doing drive-bys or walking up and blowing your whole biscuit off, right? People were just like, hey, I'll hit you up and they can catch that fade, or we can do rumble or whatever, a melee, however the case may be. And I remember there was a big family in Merced called the Garzas. They were no joke, right? They were from a barrio called VMR, Barrio Merced Rifa. I kind of spoke on that on the other channel, that hood. The first Norteños established, in Merced. And they wanted pleito, man. They wanted funk with these guys. A lot of these brothers, a lot of this family had been in and out of incarceration. So they already knew what time it was with the North and the Sur. See, a lot of us didn't know. I hadn't been locked up yet. I didn't know exactly how thick the blood was. I didn't know about the sangre that was spilled. All I knew was I was a Norteño by proxy because I came from that area and I was from Northern California. That's what I was supposed to be. But I didn't understand the situation, how much guerra and what had happened within the system. And everything that happens in the system affects the streets. See, at this time, I didn't know that these two brothers that had been in the system were coming out establishing righteously for what they believed in, their movement. Just because they lived in Northern California didn't mean a thing, homie. They were going to do what they did. And I have to respect them for that, even after all these years, because they were going against lions, homes. They were in a lion's den. They were in a caja, homes, and they were fighting their way out. And they did it pretty drastically and heavily. And I'm going to tell you some stories about situations where they helped me and they didn't. Just what it was. So anyways, ATown started to become deep. Going into about 1990 is when I think they hit their peak as far as Sureñoing, right? Everybody knew about them. They had put in some work. And that's just what it was. Well, anyways, this particular day, a gang of homeboys got together, and I was a kid. So I didn't go, but I heard about it, that I guess the Norteños approached these guys at a park, hit them up, and that Max took flight, right? Max took flight first, and the Sureños actually won this battle. They actually put it down. They were deeper. These Vatos weren't expecting these Vatos to act out like this. But like I said, coming from the Southern California area, they were already advanced, homes. They were gangbanging 101. They were really putting in that work. So there was a lot of things over the years that went back and forth. And I remember my primo being heavily in the mix. And one time, my jefito was a DJ. He was a house party DJ. That's what he did. He really didn't work. But when he wanted to do something, he was heavily into music like my jefita. He would go to house parties and DJ. And my dad was well respected, very well known, and was one of them guys, man, although he was from Southside Modesto, he was able to kick it with everyone because he wasn't into the Norte or the Sur. He predated that, man. He was more into just if you're Mexicano, if you're Chicano, if you're a biker, you're a Native American, whoever you were, if you were brown or red, he fucked with you, right? And he had a lot of white homeboys too. Woods, yes, my dad fucked with you guys, tough, brother. And he fucked with the Africanos. I mean, he was just one of them dudes that was feared and respected by all. Very big man. I'll always remember my father in that. At the time of his death, his demise, we didn't see eye to eye on certain situations, but that's neither here nor there. I still love him. I'll always respect him even more so than the love, right? Because that's just what it is. So I remember my father calling me one time. I was a little kid, and he was like, hey, do you want to come spend time? Do you want to come kick it with me? Do you want to come enjoy, a party? And I was a young kid. Hell yeah, I want to go to the party. So I remember getting a ride from one of my primos and pulling up to this party. And it was Sureño party. Dun, dun, dun. And it was actually at this guy's, Max and Sal Flores' house. The two founders of ATown, the movement. And I call it the movement, and I'll explain to you why. I remember getting there, man, and thinking to myself, damn, I'm in no man's land, I'm surrounded. But they didn't really know I was Norteño gangbanging like that. And I'm going to keep it real. I wasn't out there throwing. I was a little kid, 9, 10 years old. I'm not throwing it out there like that. So I go to this party, and I actually got to see how the Sureños wiggle, right? And quietly as it's kept, it was the same old thing. A whole bunch of motherfuckers in garage drinking and smoking the pookie, and a whole bunch of motherfuckers in the back by a bonfire trying to bone a fat chick. That's pretty much what it was. My dad was over there DJing. I remember he was bumping that song, To the Beat, y'all. I think that had just come out. So it could have been fucking 90, 91. I don't know. But anyways, that party was hype. And I gained a lot of respect for Max and Sal Flores because they treated me, because of who my family was, with a lot of respect, man. And many a times I've told a story, man, where Max pulled up, man, and actually backed my play against some Involters from Winton. And it was a familia thing. A lot of people talk about ATown, because that Sureño movement right there was one of the first established in Northern California in the Central Valley, and still continues to do their thing. Now, recently I've heard that Norteños have established Northside Atwater. They've established in Atwater. I never thought I'd see the day, because Sureños had a lock on that shit. They had a foothold in there deep, man. I mean, anytime we wiggle through Atwater, you had to keep your head on swivelization, homes. Because if you didn't, them Vatos were thick and everywhere. I had a couple homeboys that got bodied out there, in Atwater. And the funk was going back and forth. Vatos would go into Merced looking for Vatos from ATown. Vatos from ATown would go into Merced. It started to become really north and south. And that's why, a lot of the Vatos from up north, Northern California, Norteños, have so much hatred and animosity towards Sureños, because we've been dealing with that shit since it started, since it was established, Max and Sal Flores, man, these two guys, they brought a whole movement with them. They were the ones that were the innovators. They were the ones that brought that Southern California style to Northern California. And I remember my primo getting incarcerated. Now, trip out, this is what I always wondered about, is my primo gets locked up, man. He does some time in Tehachapi. I think he was in Corco. He was a Sureño, and he got out. And one day I get at him. I'm, hey, what's up, primo? How was it? Because when we were at my grandmother's house, family is family. His blood is always thicker than water. But once you hit them streets and pass that threshold, homes, it is what it is, right? And this Vato was like, yeah, fucking, I'm from Orange County, yes. And I was like, Orange County? Fool, you ain't never been to Disneyland? What are you talking about? Puto, right? He was like, nah, homie, I went in there. That's the ranfla I was kicking it with, homies. They call me ese whoop-de-whoop from Orange County. And I was like, all right. So I automatically assumed from that Vatos from Atwater weren't getting their respect, or they were, you had to go down south or get locked up, homes. and start claiming something else. That was my primo's own trip. That's what he chose to do, you know? I love my primo. I respect my primo. He's one of the hardest motherfuckers I've ever met in my life or ever seen in action. The Vato's the type of Vato that'll pull up on you, jump out the car and choke you and say, don't you owe me $20? I seen it in real life. Just down, Holmes, down, you know? Downer than I ever thought he was going to be. And I got love for him. Facts. You know, I don't give a fuck what he claims or where he's from. You know, I got a lot of love for my primo because he's about that business. And all the Norteños in Merced knew my primo was about that motherfucking business. He was about his beeswax, right? And yours too, if you fuck with him. But as far as the founders go from A-Town, you know, about the got at me. The reason why I'm doing this spiel is a little youngster from A-Town got at me. Hey, Essie, do you know our history? I do, in fact, know the history because I was there when it started. And like I said, two brothers, Sal and Max Flores, were the originators that brought it from Long Beach to Merced, California, or to Merced County, to Atwater, and established A-Town. Now, for a while there was a lot of inner fighting, man. You know, I guess the A-Town movement was starting to fight within their own. And then there was a big indictment that happened, you know, happened a few years back called Operation Scrapbook, where they actually gaffled up a lot of these guys because they're making moves, man, according or allegedly to what the feds felt that they were making these moves. They were really doing what they were doing. And all I can say is, you know, I don't know any of their business, what they were into, but I do know that after so mmany decades and so many years, they were still around. This is a gang that has thrived, not thrived on the misery of others, but have done their thing within a little town. And when I say little town, Atwater's, it's getting bigger now. You know, they're starting to build houses out there and shit. They've been doing that for years. But it probably had 25,000 people in it. But they were able to put a stranglehold on that town, on that city for a very long time. And it all happened with two brothers' idealisms and what they thought, you know, it should be. Now, over the years, I heard a lot of different rumors concerning Max and Sal Flores. A lot of he said, she said, a lot of bullshit. And I know that Sal did move to Mexico and did pass away. And respects and rest in peace to him. I did a profile on him on the Collective Clips. Make sure you tap into that so you can just see the type of man he was. I believe Sal was the older brother. Max was more the dangerous one, man. He was more the gangbanger and really in the mix. He was the one that we had to look out for. Sal was more the businessman, kind of laid back. But they were both about that business. You know, back in them days, like I said, they were two big vatos that came out of nowhere, was really to do their thing. That's the beginning of A-Town, man. Started in 1989. There's no fucking doubt about it. I started to see a lot of vatos from LA move into the area and fuck with A-Town. You know, I remember one day a street called Bobby Street, right? That was a dangerous fucking street. Still is. You know, it's one of them streets, nothing but like, looks like project houses on both sides, low income housing, nothing but a whole bunch of tiradas and sconcas and tortas, you know what I mean? And these vatos have a fucking lock on that spot, right? We used to cruise into that spot just looking for vatos. You wouldn't see it, but at nighttime you hear, it'd be like a Fool's Gone Wild episode, man. You go down that motherfucking fool, you might get wilded on, right? That's just how it was. But Atwater, you know, I gotta respect them. You know, I no longer am involved into the politics, into the gangbanging, but I always had a shred and an ounce of respect for them because, you know, any gang that goes into another person's territory and is able to establish, you don't take light of the other hoods. See, when it comes to people, they'll be like, yeah, we moved in, Holmes, we took over your territory. No, it was nothing like that. The Norteños were not focused on these guys because there wasn't a lot of them. But if you sleep on motherfuckers, they start to accumulate numbers and they start to make noise, Holmes. And that's exactly what these two brothers did. So Max and Sal Flores were the founders. My primo was involved in the beginning, man. To what degree of involvement he's in now, I don't know. And I wouldn't speak on it even if I did. But I will say this. I was right there when they came up with ATown Surenos. I was like, what? Hell no, that's it. But that's just what it was. With that being said, gente, facts, man. That is the establishment of A-Town, one of the biggest upstate Sureño gangs in Northern California. And hate it or love it, you got to respect it, man. Just facts, just what it is, you know. With that being said, I hope that you move smooth with a purpose. Get everything that you want coming to you. Remember, at the end of the day, it's all about the struggle to strive and the strive to struggle. Because if you sit here, man, and you think about situations and you start to reminisce and think back, you know, a lot of people ask me questions and it reassesses my mind to thinking about things. I got to say, them two brothers was dangerous as a motherfucker, bro. Nobody wanted that smoke. Motherfuckers to sit here and say, oh, yeah. Nah. Nobody wanted smoke with Max and Sal, bro. It's facts, you know what I mean? With that being said, man, you know, I don't know if A-Town is the same. After Operation Scrapbook, it kind of took out the, you know, the inner circle or the leadership. But I'm sure they were able to reestablish that's what they do. You know what it is, man. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive and struggle and strive for what I honestly and truly believe in, and that's the betterment of all people. Let's come together like some butt cheeks. You know what it is. The gun. Bang, bang. Double up.